can't comment too deeply, but what is
Here it is.
that we've
The
consistently
impeachment
talked
of Donald Trump.
about in public
That's right.
is cooperation.
The impeachment
on,
of Donald
supporting
Trump.
the reform agenda, anti-corruption efforts, and helping President Zelensky implement his plans to end Russia's war against Ukraine.
In other words, they're based on official U.S. policy?
Correct.
And is there a process to determine official U.S. policy?
Yes, that is my job, is to coordinate U.S. policy. So throughout the preceding year that I've been on staff, I had undertaken an effort to make sure we had a cohesive, coherent U.S. policy.
And as you listened to the call, did you observe whether President Trump was following the talking points based on the official U.S. policy?
Counsel, the president could choose to use the talking points or not. He's the president, but they were not consistent with what I provided, yes.
Let's take a look at a couple of excerpts from this call. And right after President Zelensky thanked President Trump for the United States support in the area of defense, President Trump asks President Zelensky for a favor and then raises this theory of Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election. He says in the highlighted portion, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server, they say Ukraine has it." Now, Colonel Vindman, was this statement based on the official talking points that you had prepared?
No.
And was this statement related to the 2016 Ukraine interference in the 2016 election part of the official U.S. policy?
No, it was not.
Now, at the time of this July 25th call, Colonel Vindman, were you aware of a theory that Ukraine had intervened or interfered in the 2016 U.S. election?
I was.
Are you aware of any credible evidence to support this theory?
I am not.
Are you also aware that Vladimir Putin had promoted this theory of Ukrainian interference in the 2016 election?
I am well aware of that fact.
And ultimately, which country did U.S. intelligence services determine to have interfered in the 2016 election?
It is the consensus of the entire intelligence community that the Russians interfered in U.S. elections in 2016.
Let's go to another excerpt from this call where President Trump asked President Zelensky to investigate his political opponent, Vice President Joe Biden. Here President Trump says, "The other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it." "It sounds horrible to me," he said. Again, Colonel Vindman, was this included in your talking points?
It was not.
Such a request to investigate a political opponent consistent with official U.S. policy?
It was not consistent with the policy as I understood it.
Now, are you aware of any credible allegations or evidence to support this notion that Vice President Biden did something wrong or against U.S. policy with regard to Ukraine?
I am not.
Ms. Williams, are you familiar with any credible evidence to support this theory against Vice President Biden?
No, I'm not.
Now, Ms. Williams, prior to the July 25th call, approximately how many calls between the President of the United States and foreign leaders had you listened to?
I would say roughly a dozen.
Had you ever heard a call like this?
As I testified before, I believe what I found unusual or different about this call was the President's reference to specific investigations, and that struck me as different than other calls I had listened to.
You testified that you thought it was political in nature. Why did you think that?
I thought that the references to specific individuals and investigations such as former Vice President Biden and his son struck me as political in nature, given that the former Vice President is a political opponent of the President.
And so you thought that it could potentially be designed to assist President Trump's re-election effort?
I can't speak to what the President's motivation was in referencing it, but I just noted that the reference to Biden sounded political to me.
Colonel Vindman, you said in your deposition that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the political benefits of the president's demands. For those of us who are not rocket scientists, can you explain what you meant by that?
So my understanding is that it was the connection to investigate into a political opponent was inappropriate and improper. I made that connection as soon as the president brought up the Biden investigation.
Colonel Vindman, you testified that the President Trump's request for a favor from President Zelensky would be considered as a demand to President Zelensky. After this call, did you ever hear from any Ukrainians, either in the United States or Ukraine, about any pressure that they felt to do these investigations that President Trump demanded?
Not that I can recall.
Did you have any discussions with officials at the embassy here, the Ukrainian embassy here in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, I did.
Did you discuss at all the demand for investigations with them?
I did not.
Did you discuss at all, at any point, their concerns about the hold on security assistance?
To the best of my recollection, in the August timeframe, the Ukrainian embassy started to become aware of the hold on security assistance, and they were asking if I had any comment on that, or if I could substantiate that.
And that was before it became public, is that right?
Yes.
And what did you respond?
I believe I said that I don't recall, frankly. I don't recall what I said, but I believe it may have been something along the lines of I'm not aware of it.
You testified that one of your concerns about the request for investigations related to U.S. domestic politics was that Ukraine may lose bipartisan support. Why was that a concern of yours?
Ukraine is in a war with Russia, and the security assistance that we provide Ukraine is significant. Absent that security assistance, and maybe even more importantly, the signal of support for Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, that would likely encourage Russia to potentially escalate, to pursue further aggression, further undermining Ukrainian sovereignty, European security, and U.S. security.
So, in other words, Ukraine is heavily dependent on United States support, both diplomatically, financially, and also militarily.
Correct.
Colonel Vindman, what languages do you speak?
I speak Russian and Ukrainian, and a little bit of English.
Do you recall what language President Zelensky spoke on this July 25th phone call?
I know he made a valiant effort to speak English. He'd been practicing up his English.
Here it is.
But he also spoke
The
Ukrainian.
impeachment of Donald
I
Trump.
want to look at the third excerpt from
That's right.
the July 25th
The
call.
impeachment of Donald Trump.
And Chairman Schiff addressed this with you in his questioning. And you see in the highlighted portion, it says specifically to the company that you mentioned in this issue. Is that the portion of the call record that, Colonel Vindman, you thought President Zelensky actually said Burisma?
Correct.
And you testified earlier that his his understanding that when President Trump mentioned the Bidens, that referred to the company Burisma, sounded to you like he was prepped or prepared for this call. Is that right?
That is correct.
I want go to the next slide, if we could, which is actually a text message that neither of you is on, but this is from Ambassador Kurt Volker to Andrei Yermak. And Colonel Vindman, who's Andrei Yermak?
Andrei Yermak is a senior advisor within the presidential administration to Ukrainian presidential administration. He's a senior advisor to President Zelensky.
Now, this text message is less than a half hour before the call on July 25th. And since neither of you are on it, I'll read it. It says from Ambassador Volker, "Good lunch, thanks. Heard from White House. Assuming President Z convinces Trump he will investigate, quote, get to the bottom of what happened, unquote, in 2016, we will nail down date for visit to Washington. Good luck. See you tomorrow, Kurt." Now, is this the sort of thing that you're referring to when you say that it sounded like President Zelensky was prepared for this call?
That this would be consistent, yes.
Now, turning to the fourth excerpt from the July 25th call, where Ukraine's President Zelensky links the White House meeting to the investigations that President Trump requests. President Zelensky says, "I also wanted to thank you for your invitation to visit the United States, specifically Washington, D.C. On the other hand, I also wanted to assure you that we will be very serious about the case and will work on the investigation." Colonel Vindman, when President Zelensky says, "on the other hand," would you agree that he's acknowledging a linkage between the White House visit that he mentions in the first sentence and the investigations that he mentions in the second sentence?
It could be taken that way. I'm not sure if it seems like a reasonable conclusion.
And if that is the case, that would be consistent with the text message that Ambassador Volker sent to Andrei Yermak right before the call. Is that right?
Seemingly so.
Now, you've testified in your deposition that a White House visit, an Oval Office visit, is very important to President Zelensky. Why is that?
The show of support for President Zelensky, still a brand new president, frankly a new politician on the Ukrainian political scene, looking to establish his bona fides as a regional and maybe even a world leader, would want to have a meeting with the United States, the most powerful country in the world, and Ukraine's most significant benefactor, in order to be able to implement his agenda.
It would provide him with some additional legitimacy at home?
Yes.
So just to summarize, in this July 25th call between the presidents of the United States and Ukraine, President Trump demanded a favor of President Zelensky to conduct investigations that both of you acknowledge were for President Trump's political interest, not the national interest, and in return for his promise of a much-desired White House meeting for President Zelensky. Colonel Vindman, is that an accurate summary of the excerpts that we just looked at?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Colonel Vindman, you immediately reported this call to the NSC lawyers. Why did you do that?
So, at this point, I had already been tracking this initially, what I would describe as alternative narrative, false narrative, and I was certainly aware of the fact that it was starting to reverberate, gain traction. The fact that it, in the July 10th call, ended up being pronounced by a public official, Ambassador Sondland, had me alerted to this, and I was, subsequent to that report, I was
there
invited
you have
to
it.
follow up with any other concerns to
The
Mr.
impeachment
Eisenberg.
of Donald Trump.
We're going to discuss that July 10th meeting in a moment.
That's
but
right.
When you say
The
alternative
impeachment
false
of Donald
narratives,
Trump.
are you referring to the two investigations that President Trump referenced in the call?
Yes.
Now, at some point, did you also discuss how the written summary of the call record should be handled with the NSC lawyers?
There was, following the report, there was a discussion in the legal shop on the best way to manage the transcript, yes.
What did you understand they concluded?
My understanding is that this was viewed as a sensitive transcript, and to avoid leaks, and if I recall the term properly, or something along the lines of preserve the integrity of the transcript, it should be segregated to a smaller group of folks.
To preserve the integrity of the transcript, what did that mean?
I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like a legal term. I'm not an attorney, but it was. I didn't take it as anything nefarious. I just understood that they wanted to keep it in a smaller group.
If there was real interest in preserving the integrity of the transcript, don't you think they would have accepted your correction that Burisma should have been included?
Not necessarily. The way these edits occur, they go through, like everything else, a approval process. I made my contribution. It was cleared by Mr. Morrison. Then when I returned it, sometimes that doesn't happen. There are administrative errors. I think that in this case, I didn't see. When I first saw the transcript without the two substantive items that I had attempted to include, I didn't see that as nefarious. I just saw it as okay, no big deal. These might be meaningful, but it's not that big a deal.
You said two substantive issues. What was the other one?
There was a reference in a section. On page 4, the top paragraph. Let me find the right spot. Okay.
There you have
You
it.
can look into it.
The impeachment
the
of
lips.
Donald Trump.
There are videos.
That's right. The
that I recall.
impeachment
Well,
of
there were
Donald
recordings.
Trump.
Instead of an ellipses, it should have said, to what you heard, that there are recordings.
Correct.
Did you ultimately learn where the call record was put?
I understood that it was being segregated into a separate system, separate secure system.
Why would it be put on a separate secure system?
This is definitely not unprecedented, but at times, if you want to limit access to a smaller group of folks, you put it on the secure system to ensure that a smaller group of people with access to the secure system have it.
But can't you also limit the number of people who can access it on the regular system?
You can do that, but to the best of my recollection, the decision was made, frankly, on the fly after the fact after I conveyed my concerns to Mr. Eisenberg. Mr. Ellis came in. He hadn't heard the entire conversation, and when it was mentioned that it was sensitive, it was kind of on the fly decision to just segregate it in this other system.
Mr. Eisenberg and Mr. Ellis are the NSC lawyers?
Correct.
But it was your understanding that it was not a mistake to put it on the highly classified system, is that right?
I'm not sure I understand.
Was it intended to be put on the highly classified system by the lawyers? Or was it a mistake that it was put there?
I think it was intended, but again, it was intended to prevent leaks and to limit access.
Now,
There you have it.
testified both of you about
The impeachment of
infiltration
Donald
call
Trump.
a little earlier.
That's right.
And Colonel Vindman,
The
you
impeachment
indicated that
of
you
Donald
did
Trump.
include, in your talking points, the idea of Ukraine rooting out corruption, but that President Trump